So I've been at Okemos for a very long time. And I think before we really talk about the service group, I think I have to give a little bit of my personal background. So I grew up in Okemos. I've been here my whole life. And I grew up in a family that was service first. Both of my parents were public servants, and we grew up where we knew we had a responsibility to give back to our communities. And so that's a very big part of my foundation. I grew up going to nursing homes and playing bingo or painting nails. We went to soup kitchens and we did quite a bit around the community. And so that became a big part of my identity. When I went to the University of Michigan, I did a 5-year program where some of you probably did it as well, where I got my master's degree as well as my teaching certificate. And I focused my master's thesis on service and the impact of community service on students and how it impacts education and sense of self. And so once again, that foundation that I had, I poured it into my own education, knowing that I wanted service to be a big part of my classroom. And so then, when I came back to teaching in Okemos, I started coaching basketball, and I decided that this was a really easy avenue to bring service in. For a new teacher, it was, I didn't know how to really bring it into my classroom yet, but I knew that I could bring it in through my athletes. And so every Friday, instead of practice, I would take my players to a local elementary school with a high population of at-risk students. And we would serve as mentors, and we would play basketball with them. Of course, we'd do arts and crafts, but mostly it was just communication. And my players became kind of check-in points for the elementary students. And so the bond became very strong, and we continued that. I coached freshmen, and they did that all the way through their senior years. In 2001, my athletic director and my principal at the time asked if I would expand the program because they saw the impact that it was having on both the elementary students and the high school students. So then I started thinking about, okay, what can I do? How can I create something where everyone has an opportunity to give back? Our school, of course, has National Honor Society, and they have amazing opportunities for volunteerism, but you have to have a certain GPA, and you have to be, really at least a junior to participate. So I knew I wanted something that was open to everyone. And then I started thinking about, I was heavily involved in student council and helping run that. And I thought, what if I created a student council type thing that could really do service rather than student council-y things? And so that's how Action was born. So I originally had 12 student leaders, and we grew Action together. Action stands for All Connecting to Improve Our Neighborhoods, and it's grown into something really remarkable. It is a huge organization now. We have over 500 members, as Rhonda told you. And this past school year, we did over 300 acts of community service. So it's pretty darn amazing. We're a school of about 1,500 kids. So we have, a large portion of our population is involved in community service. I think if you look at our 24, 25 highlights for those 300 acts of service, 300 plus, we had 195 of them at mostly our elementary schools, our middle school. We have a preschool program, and at our own school at the high school. And so we helped out at 195 of those events. And Action really has become a problem-solving thing in our district. As we all know, we're on tough times, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of money for educational things. And so the district relies on us quite a bit, and they ask us for help at all sorts of events. There's also been a decrease in parent involvement since COVID. And so we're finding that we need our students to step up because we don't have as many parents who are willing to volunteer at elementary events and things like that. And so it's been a really good partnership. We do quite a bit of community outreach. We do a lot of 5K races where my volunteers will go and cheer. They serve as court or race marshals. We do a lot with the environment and eco-friendliness and recycling, cleanups. We go to the library. We serve at many soup kitchens. We go to local nursing homes. We do quite a bit. And I'm really proud of the work that we have done. For this list is not extensive, but this is most of the places that we volunteer throughout the community. So when I first started Action, I reached out to as many community places as I could. I reached out to my parents, my students' parents, and asked them if they knew of places we could volunteer. And so it was a lot of on the ground work, going and meeting people and setting up these partnerships. And now the partnerships are pretty natural. And most places in the local area know that they can depend on us. We're very good about showing up. We make mistakes sometimes, and it's a student-run organization. And sometimes my students aren't quite as organized as they should be, but I'm pretty good at teaching them how to lead and how to follow through. I just realized this is in a presentation mode. I'm very sorry. So we had last year, we had over 500 members, as we told you. We'd grown prior to COVID, we'd grown to about 400 members. And then COVID hit and we plummeted because we couldn't do hands-on volunteering. And then we grew to back to over our 400 to 500 in the past year. And this year we just held our membership drive and we are at over 500. We're at about 540 right now, students who have committed to being a member of Action. In order to join Action, I do charge dues. I charge $20 for students to join. And they then also have to complete a commitment form, which is basically a contract that says that when they sign up for an event, they will show up. When they're at an event, they will not have their phones out. When they're at an event, they will look eye to eye with people that we're serving. And I meet with the kids regularly. We hold meetings in our auditorium because we have so many kids. And we talk about how do you interact with adults. And I think I've noticed in the last 5 years or so, our people skills are struggling a bit. And kids are kind of afraid. They're afraid to make phone calls. Sometimes I'm afraid to make a phone call too, though. So I get it. But they're afraid to make phone calls. And sometimes they're afraid to, initiate that conversation. Sometimes they don't know, how do we approach an adult? So I try to teach the kids before they go and serve these things. And we do some role play activities. And then they're prepared to go into the community, and it's pretty amazing. So we had about 500 kids last year. We have 540 committed to doing at least 3 volunteer events this school year. And that's all I asked them to do, at least 3 events per school year in order to be considered a member. And kids love it. Here are some pictures of things that we've done. I do have permission from all of these students to share their pictures. You can see that the students have t-shirts every year. I make sure, so part of the dues, they pay for the t-shirts. And then they have also the captains, my leaders. So I have 41 leaders. They wear t-shirts that are a different color, and on the back it says their last name and that they are a captain. And so the sites that we serve, they know exactly who our leaders are and who's in charge. This truly is a student-run group in the sense that my students, when they go to the sites, they are the ones that are leading the event. They are the ones that are guiding the other volunteers. They're making sure that they're not on their phones, that they're doing the job that's been, requested. Most places underestimate how great our students are, and they request more students than necessary and more time than necessary. And so I've trained my leaders to make sure that they look for ways to help and ways to fill buckets. Because if there's not enough work for us, that's when kids start to, go back to their phones and things like that. And so my students really look for extra work to do. So for example, we were at a soup kitchen last weekend, and the soup kitchen had requested 20 volunteers when they probably only needed 10 volunteers. And so there wasn't enough work to do at the time. We had already made the food, and then there was a big break between making the food and when the patrons would come to get the food. And so my students looked around and they realized that the gym that we were serving in was really dirty. So they went and they got buckets and they filled those buckets up with soap and water, and they were washing the floor, they washed the walls. And it was really remarkable. And I was very, very proud of them. And I think parents, I try to document events and I make sure that my student volunteers document events, because when parents see their kids doing things like this, they're like, what? They don't do this at home. But it is remarkable when we empower students. And I know all of the teachers in here know this. When we empower students, they rise and they do such a beautiful job. And so I often cry at events because you get filled with so much emotion, and my bucket gets filled because you see the good, you see how amazing these students are and how much they want to give and how much they have to give. We are all over the community, and it's really pretty interesting to see our students learn to work with our elderly community, and then the next volunteer event they work with our preschool students or even the babies in the program. And so it's pretty neat to see them have all of these different opportunities. I am selective in the types of volunteer opportunities that I take in. They have to be hands-on. We do have NHS, we do have Key Club, we have other organizations that also do community service. And so, I might send some events their way. For example, we just had a request for stuffing envelopes, which is an important job and it needs to be done. But I don't think that fits action, because I want action to be hands-on, working with community members or working with the environment, doing the hard work, not sitting and doing something that doesn't require that challenge of interacting or the challenge of hard physical work. And so we have plenty of opportunities for work and for service, but I do pass up ones that are not hands-on. I think if we look at how it goes right back to Carol's presentation just before mine, service is bucket filling. And interestingly, I meet with my captains every summer, 2 meetings, and then I meet with them every Friday at 7 a.m. So we can make sure that we're, fulfilling the duties that we have agreed to, but also how can I help them be better leaders? How can I help them serve more effectively? What problems do we have to work with? Because sometimes we have problems, of course. And every summer when we have our first meeting, I start with Carol's book. I start with, have you filled a bucket today? And I usually cry when I read it. And then I talk about my background. But I think we see that service truly does fill buckets, and it's one of the greatest way to fill buckets. I see my students feel connected to something bigger than them. And we all know that high school can be such a lonely time. And we know that, especially because of the phones, sometimes those make us feel even lonelier, and so when we have this real face-to-face connection, the students feel connected to each other. They feel connected to me. They feel connected to whichever adult is. I obviously can't chaperone 300 events a year, so I do need help. And so I'm able to find those student teachers. They often are willing to help me, or parents or other community members. But students feel connected to them. There's another person they can go to and talk with. And then students finally connect with people outside of our immediate school community. And that's pretty neat to see as well. A lot of connections and networking happens, and those, things continue on. I see my students get a lot of confidence. The volunteers suddenly realize that they can do hard things and they can make a change. And when we were at the elderly home in Okemos, one of them, when we were there recently, I had a student leave, and then she came back to talk to me, and she said, "Miss Free, you won't believe it, but this woman told me I was like her granddaughter. And I don't even have a grandma. I've never had a grandma." And so it touched my heart, and it touched her heart. And it was just amazing to see the impact of somebody's kind word and her actions. And so she is 100% sure she's going to be a captain for me next year. She wants to be a leader, and she wants to work at and with our elderly outreach programs, because she was so touched by someone saying that, she reminded them of someone that they love deeply. And I think a lot of our high school students, and I'm sure the high school teachers here know this, a lot of them are just looking for love, and service is a good way to feel loved. The joy and the ripple effect of kindness. Our last presentation just talked about that quite a bit. But we know that the moods get boosted. In the very beginning of today, Rhonda talked about the dopamine and how, when that rises, we feel better. And I think that the students, even if they don't recognize that's what's happening, they leave almost every event feeling better about themselves. And then I think this balance of taking the focus off of ourselves and having the focus beyond us is very, very important. And I think service does that. And we have a tendency, especially when we're feeling down, I think sometimes to just focus on us and our little world. And sometimes that outward focus is all we need to get back on track. I'm transitioning now to a big endeavor that Action has taken on in the last 8 years. Every May, we do a Sock Out Suicide program, and this may seem counterintuitive to filling buckets, but I think this is actually one of our biggest bucket filling events that we do each year. We just encourage the community to put on a pair of fun socks and talk and help end the stigma. And this past year, we were really lucky because the entire Meridian Township community joined us. We had Hazlitt High School join us, which is a neighboring school. We had East Lansing join us, which is another neighboring school. And we had several businesses join us. And it's pretty neat as well, because students, once they graduate from Okemos High School, they take Sock Out Suicide to their universities or places of work. And so we get messages from all over the world, quite literally, of people who are participating in this. And we did a 5K this year that was just a mental health free fun run. And it was super successful. We had a couple hundred people come out with that. We talked about how movement and mental health works well. We make students who participate, and we ask community members who participate, we ask them to take a pledge, and not just wear the socks, but also seek help if they're struggling, encourage others to seek help if they notice that they're struggling, and we give them the education of how to seek help. And we're also really, really fortunate this year because we were able to get every single elementary school prior to this past year. Most of the schools were hesitant to join in with Suck Out Suicide because of the stigma. And so my students and I worked very hard to figure out how can we make this idea accessible to elementary students? How can we make it, elementary friendly? And so we changed the focus. We dropped the word suicide for elementary and we changed it to mental health rocks. Wear your colorful socks. And every elementary participated. Many of our elementaries had almost 100% participation. We provide socks for those who don't have them. I get plenty of donations. And it was just a community event where suddenly we were talking. And I think when we talk about mental health, we fill buckets because if we talk about it, we're not so alone. And if you find out that somebody else has struggled, then again, you're not so alone. And it takes a lot of courage to talk about suicide publicly. People are still very nervous, but my students did a beautiful job. And I think that this day, last year it was on May 16th, on this day, I had more students come to me and thank me than any other service that we do in my 25 years of running this club. I think this has been the one that has been the biggest bucket filler because there is that connection and there is that feeling that we're not alone, there is hope, and we can be change makers. And so seeing this grow in the last 8 years has been really rewarding and really quite amazing. So I'm very proud of this, and I'm really proud of my district. It's taken us a few years to get the district to join in, but Okemos is very much on board, and they observe Suck Out Suicide, and they help me promote it, and they allow the students an opportunity to connect. Our middle schools did a beautiful job this year. They had everyone make their own art socks in addition to wearing socks, and on those socks they wrote the things that they're grateful for. And earlier today we talked about gratitude and how much gratitude can fill our buckets, and so we're seeing that in our elementary schools as well. I do provide every site that we volunteer at some expectations because I've learned that most places don't know high school students, and they don't know necessarily how to work with them or what to expect from them. And so I find that I have to teach our sites sometimes in the beginning more than, not every time that we volunteer at places, but in the beginning, I really have to teach sites how to utilize high school students and what's appropriate for them to expect and what's not. High school students need direction, and when they don't have direction, we know that things can go awry. And so as long as the sites give very clear direction, there's a meeting in the beginning, they have clear tasks assigned, things go well. And another thing that I've noticed that I've really had to work on with our community events is reminding the sites that we volunteer at that gratitude is important. A lot of our sites, we see adults who are stressed and adults who need to get things done. And I'm very guilty of this myself. Sometimes we bark at people who are trying to help us. And so my students see that, and sometimes their feelings get hurt. And so I try very hard to remind my students that they need to, put that lid on, like we learned in the last session. And, it's not about them. It's people are stressed, but I also find that it's really helpful for me to remind our adults that we do need to show gratitude, and we need to thank the students at the end, and we need to tell them specifically what did they do well. And showing appreciation and just sending a quick thanks really means a lot to the kids. I've spent quite a bit of time building our Instagram. I'm trying not to be on social media as much, but Action has a social media account. We have an Instagram account. And every week I have a member of the week that did something amazing at one of our events. We usually have about 10 to 12 events occurring within a week. And so I look for great moments and I try to celebrate those. We have a volunteer of the month that is like our ultimate volunteer of that month. Sometimes it's a kid who volunteered 10 times in a month. Sometimes it's somebody who just went out of the way to be kind. So we celebrate that. And additionally, we have a leader of the month. So one of my captains of the month. So they feel appreciated and seen. And I think when they feel seen and appreciated and valued, things are great. And then they want to do more. So I think it's a pretty amazing program. I think we've seen it change lives. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done. And I think that is my presentation. I can stop that sharing. Okay. So, Rhonda.
I'm here. One thing I don't
Hello.
know, sometimes it's hard finding the mute
Oh, I know.
and the unmute and the camera, but thank you so much. Now, are there any questions
Uh,
for Rachel? I'm not seeing anything. May we use some of the ideas? I'm sure some people snapped some shots of the screen. Are you willing to share your slide deck?
oh, of course.
Absolutely, this is great stuff. It's almost like another name for filling your bucket and doing it with the students, teaching people gratitude and appreciation. And there is so much satisfaction, emotional, mental satisfaction in giving and helping others. That is a wellness strategy. That it definitely is a bucket filling strategy. And
Yes.
teaching younger people how to do that and getting addicted to doing it is a great thing. So
One
thank you
of
so
the
much.
one of the things that I've had a request for, Rhonda, is to expand the program more, which, as we know, with education, there's not a lot of money for this, and I do
Right.
work for free. But they want me to expand it to offer opportunities for families to volunteer together.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great idea because,
I
again,
think I think it's a wonderful idea because
it's
it really ideally these things should come from the family. Children should learn this from the household. And unfortunately, it doesn't happen all the time for different reasons. So
right.
yeah, that would be a great thing. Absolutely.
Thank you
Thank
so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.